Hi everyone, my name is Megan, and for my final presentation I decided to do cyclothymia disorder and how it relates into women. So first off, to kick off this presentation, I'm going to give you a brief description of what cyclothymia disorder is. This is a milder and rarer form of bipolar. It involves frequent hypomanic and depressive episodes. And as you can see from this little diagram that I have on my right side, only 1% of the population has been diagnosed with it, which we'll discuss later. And it also describes some hypomanic and depression symptoms. So depression symptoms are usually known more than hypomanic symptoms, I feel. Hypomanic symptoms would be, talkativeness, hyperactivity, high energy, essentially, that people really notice a difference in your behaviors. So according to the DSM, what are the criteria that you need to meet in order to be diagnosed with cyclothymia disorder? So to start off, for at least 2 years, there needs to be multiple periods of hypomanic symptoms. And this part's very important. These symptoms cannot meet the criteria for an episode, a hypomanic episode. That is the same for depressive symptoms. They cannot meet the criteria for major depressive disorder. And during these 2 years, this criteria needs to be present for at least half the time, and the person cannot be symptom-free for longer than 2 months at a time. Now, when discussing adolescents and adults, the only difference in the criteria for this disorder is that adolescents only need to have criteria present for a year rather than the 2 years that adults need to have it present. There are a couple more criteria that I have on this slide right now. Those are that symptoms cannot or aren't better explained by schizophrenia and or other related disorders of schizophrenia. And they also cannot be attributed physiologically to substance use or a medical condition. The last criteria, according to the DSM, is that it needs to cause a significant distress and or impairment in different areas of life. So that's socially, relationship-wise, things like that need to be heavily impacted for this to work. Now, for the criteria, there is not a certain amount that needs to be met. In fact, all of these criteria need to be met. So you can't have 2 of these and have cyclothymia disorder. You need to have all of these. Now, the development of this disorder. So it typically begins in adolescence, and it reflects as a temperamental predisposition. And symptoms usually start showing around 10 years old in a child, and usually show a persistent course. And to throw a little statistic at you, about 15 to 50% of people with this disorder usually go on to develop bipolar 1 or 2 at some point in their life. Here's a little diagram showing where cyclothymia disorder is on a spectrum related to what bipolar disorder would be at, or depressive disorder. As you can see, cyclothymia is in between that elation and dysthymia, I think is how you pronounce it, rather than depressive disorder over to the right shows in a milder form of depression to a severe depression with psychosis. Now, as you see at the bottom, bipolar is that whole spectrum. So that is the kind of difference with cyclothymia. Now, moving on, what is the prevalence of cyclothymia? So with cyclothymia, I found that there's not really any research with not only cyclothymia and other at-risk groups, but also cyclothymia with women. And my best knowledge that I found is because it's often misdiagnosed with as a cluster B disorder due to the overlapping criteria. Now at the top you can see cyclothymia is associated with lifetime prevalency of approximately 0.4 to 1% and a male to female ratio of 1:1, meaning that compare cyclothymia with women and men are seen as equal. And yeah, the only thing compared to men with women is that women with this disorder usually seek treatment at a larger rate rather than men. So yeah, moving on. What are the causes of cyclothymia? So causes of cyclothymia are thought to be the similar causes to bipolar 1 and 2 because it is a subtype of it and a milder form of bipolar. So those are, genetics, stress, brain structure and function. At the bottom, you can see a couple more, which are genetic susceptibility, neurotransmitter deregulation or dysregulation, and environmental triggers are also thought to be causes for this. So the last couple slides that I have are evidence-based treatments for cyclothymia. So because cyclothymia is a subtype of bipolar disorder, I found that CBT and DBT are the biggest treatments for it. CBT and DBT are often also used in treatment of major depressive disorder, PTSD, anxiety, and schizophrenia. And I wanted to give a little overview of kind of what CBT and DBT are. So CBT is also known as cognitive behavioral therapy. This is meant to help clients reframe their thought processes. It uses the idea that your behaviors influence emotions, and then that will go on to influence your thoughts. It really helps with self-awareness and other things, but self-awareness is like the biggest one, other than the reframing of your thoughts, obviously. Along with that, the DBT is dialectical behavioral therapy. So this is more meant on really intense disorders, I found, and I could be wrong. However, this teaches skills to manage intense emotions, challenging situations. It also helps improve relationships. A big thing is that DBT typically takes around 6 months or longer, depending on the person, to complete it, because there are stages with DBT to go through before, you get to the end. This little slide, in the next slide before I'm finished, is just going to have graphics kind of depicting what DBT and CBT are. So DBT usually comes with like a work skills book, like a workbook, kind of like homework to help work through some of the skills that you learn. And the bottom left is a little description of what DBT is. It's hard for me to see when I'm recording, so I'm not going to be able to read it. However, I hope you take time to try and read it yourself. These are to my right. These are some of the topics that are touched on. So mindfulness, emotional regulation, distress tolerance, interpersonal effectiveness. Those are all things that are kind of touched upon when you work in DBT. Moving on, we have CBT. So CBT, my top left of my screen right here, shows what DBT is and what DBT focuses on. Again, I'm having a hard time reading it based on recording, so I hope that you take the time to kind of read it yourself because it is good information to know. The bottom right, though, depicts kind of, you'll see this a lot, but CBT is usually depicted as like a triangle or a circle to show kind of how it works. So you have what you think plus what you do equals how you feel, which in turn affects your behaviors. So it's just a whole cycle, and the point in working with CBT is to kind of break that cycle and reframe it some of your thought patterns to help better um, help you. The last slide, this is my last slide, but my last slide is my works cited, obviously. But yeah, I hope that you enjoyed my presentation, and I really am excited to see everybody else's presentation. So thank you very much.